You're listening to Sasquatch Syndicate.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my sensor light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard.
And all the ape believers don't want any of the paranormal believers to say anything because they're all whacked and screwed up, and we don't want them to. And all the paranormal believers don't want go to the ape believers saying, well, you're all closed-minded. You're not open to the fact that it does this and it does that.
And I look over my left shoulder, and this creature is running through the woods, and it's bulldozing the brush down. And I knew, man, this thing is going to get me.
Sasquatch Syndicate. I'm your host, Chuck, out in Seattle, Washington, along with Paul in Portland, Oregon. Thanks to all our listeners for joining us at SasquatchSyndicate.com and on our social media outlets. Before we get started tonight, we hope everyone had a great April, and thanks to all of those who participated in the Sasquatch Syndicate t-shirt giveaway by subscribing to our YouTube channel. This month's winner was Daryl Perry from Fairborn, Ohio. So Daryl, please check your Facebook for winner notification. For those that did not win, you're still entered in next month's drawing, so stay subscribed and keep checking the show for more details. So April has come and gone, and it was a really great month for the show. Paul was able to attend the Portland, Oregon monthly Bigfoot Lunch Club hosted by Guy Edwards. It's called Hopsquatch, hopsquatch.com. It's a monthly event in Portland, Oregon, and this month's guest was Cliff from Finding Bigfoot, so that was a fun event to get out to. If you live in the Portland area, I would definitely recommend checking it out. As I mentioned that, I should also note that Guy Edwards will be speaking at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference May 14th through 16th, and you can find those events at our website, SasquatchSyndicate.com, and click on events. Also this month, we attended the second annual Bigfoot Interaction Conference over in Bremerton, Washington. That event was hosted by Team Squatch in USA. Met a lot of new folks at our booth. If you picked up the podcast by stopping by, I'd like to say thank you and appreciated meeting everybody. Also, the table next to ours was hosted by Tom Powell. Tom actually has a new book out. It's called Edges of Science. I picked it up while I was there. I highly recommend it. It's a great book and very entertaining, and has a lot of great information about this subject matters. Speaking of books, if you'd like to immerse yourself in our show, we do have a book club. You can see it online at SasquatchSyndicate.com. And so if you want to pick up the book we're reading, typically we pick up those about 60 days prior to having that guest on the show. So a great way to immerse yourself into the experience of the show, understand the topic, and of course the expert or author that will be coming on the show. While I'm on events, I wanted to mention that the International Bigfoot Conference is only 4 months away now. It's Labor Day weekend in Kennewick, Washington. Kennewick, Washington is located in the south central portion of Washington state. It makes up what we call the Tri-Cities. There's 3 cities there, Kennewick, Pasco, and Richland. It's not directly in the beauty of the Northwest. It's a high desert area. If you've ever driven across I-80, would remind you a lot of western Nebraska. But it's going to put you fairly close to reaching some really great Sasquatch destinations. So if you're flying in, just some locale and some details. Pasco, Washington is the main airport there, Pasco. You're about 2 hours from Spokane, Washington, 6 hours from Boise, 3.5 hours from Portland, and about 3.5 to 4 hours out of Seattle. So a lot of different ways to get there. You could make an easy weekend of it. You could either fly in early to Seattle and Portland, go bigfooting, and then head over to the conference for the weekend and head back. It'd be a great week, or the reverse. So a lot of different ways to make a week of it, but just wanted to share those details with you guys. So for those that are planning vacations or looking for something to do or a lifelong dream, make your way out to Washington, make your way out to the Pacific Northwest. get to the conference. You're going to be about 2 hours following the conference to Mount Hood and another 3 hours to Mount Rainier, also up in the Canada area. Some prime real estate as well for some squatching up in Hope and Chilliwack up in the Fraser Valley area. So if you need more details, hit me up at chuck@sasquatchsyndicate.com. And if you decide to come on out, make sure you message us on our website or on social media. We'd love to meet you while you're in town. And I think it'll be a great experience. So if you make it out that far, get ready for a great week. We've got a great show for you guys lined up tonight. With us on the podcast is Mark. He's a radio talk show host on 1340 K-Talks AM out of Needles, California. Mark lives in Bullhead City, Arizona, but had an encounter with he and his wife that happened to him back in Oregon. In addition, we also have Shirley. Shirley's from Iron Springs, Washington. Is going to be sharing an encounter that happened with her and her husband, Ray, back in 2014. For those new to the podcast, Mark's a regular guest on the show. It also happens to be his birthday, May 1st. So happy birthday, Mark. And welcome to the show. You're going to get to hear Mark throughout the year come on and off as a special guest and always provides valuable input to the show. So Mark, welcome. And if you wouldn't mind just sharing with our listeners your background.
I am a talk show host. I have been for the last 6 or 7 years now here in Arizona.
So, Mark, now that you live down in Arizona, do you still get outdoors?
I still spend a lot of my time outdoors. Here, it's desert, so I spend a lot of time out in the desert, and I've seen bighorn sheep and burros and rattlesnakes and coyotes, foxes. Pretty much all the denizens here, they don't hide as much here as they do in Oregon.
Can you share with our listeners what your show's about?
I've got a 3-hour morning show that I do with a friend of mine, and it's a call-in show. We get callers all the time. We talk about everything, politics, gold mining, whatever.
So, Mark, you grew up pretty extensively in the Northwest. Can you kind of share your views on Sasquatch and Bigfoot and really what your thoughts were on the subject prior to your encounter?
Growing up in the Pacific Northwest, you generally have a knowledge that something is out there. Whether you believe in it or not, everybody knows what Bigfoot is. And it's kind of this fantasy thing that nobody knows if it's real or not real or what it is. But I've always had an interest in Bigfoot or Sasquatch. But once I had my experience at my house, that changed everything for me.
So, Mark, I know you shared some details with Paul and I. If you wouldn't mind, could you please share just some details about your property with our listeners?
I bought a house that was in the woods between Gales Creek and Timber, Oregon, on Highway 6, about halfway to the coast from Portland, right at the foothills of the Coast Range Mountains.
Mark, what time of the year did this all take place?
It was a hot summer night, and we had the back door open, and we were just watching TV, and it was probably 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we heard some strange sounds coming from outside, and just to kind of place it, we were the only house around. I couldn't see any other houses from where I lived. So it's not like the neighbors drove home or anything. So we heard this weird noise, and we turned off the TV and started listening. We went out on the back deck. And it was eerily silent. Usually you hear things at night. You hear birds or all kinds of critters, possums and squirrels and things out there chattering. But it was dead quiet that night. And we kept hearing this sound that we couldn't identify. It was kind of like a wailing, almost like a baby crying from a distance. And then all of a sudden a loud one that seemed much closer came, and it was more of a screeching. And we didn't really know what to think of it. We looked at each other and kind of shrugged like, oh, what the heck was that? I went back inside, and I looked up a Bigfoot website where they had a purported recording of a Bigfoot call. And it still sends a chill up my spine. When I listened to that recording, it was absolutely identical to what I just heard outside my back door.
Mark, based on the sound, how far away would you say the sound was?
The first sounds that we heard kind of sounded more like off in the distance, like maybe I guess maybe a mile away, somewhere in that range. But the closer up one, and I don't know if something moved closer or if it was something responding to the first one, but it was very close. It couldn't have been more than 200 yards from our deck.
Now, when you say your deck there, how populated is this area, Mark? Is it a pretty rural area, or are there many houses nearby?
Well, you've got urban, you've got rural, and then you've got my house, which it was right along the highway. We had a driveway that was maybe an eighth of a mile off the driveway or off the highway, but there were 3 houses within a mile, so it was very sparsely populated. So it couldn't have been a neighbor or anything. I knew my neighbors. I knew that they didn't go out on their decks and screech at night, so I knew it wasn't them.
So as you're listening to the sound, did you feel any abnormal physical symptoms while this was going on?
It was more that it just kind of stopped everything. It's hard to describe, but it's like everything just in my body just stopped. And my whole focus was on the noise. And we kept listening, and it happened several more times, back and forth between the long distance and the short distance. And while I was inside looking on the computer, my wife was still outside, and she said that she could hear what appeared to her or sounded to her like bones crunching, like something was eating bones or something with bones in it. And, there was nothing that would have done that anywhere near our house that we knew of anyway.
Mark, what type of wildlife did you have where you lived?
We typically had deer. You could hear the coyotes in the mountains, but they never came close. They were way up in the mountains. And then we had, the skunks and the possums and the raccoons and things like that. But pretty much just deer, really nothing else. But there was an occasional mountain lion, but that was, maybe twice a year we'd hear of a mountain lion sighting in the area. So, but it certainly was not a mountain lion.
Mark, based on what you were hearing, could you tell how big this creature was?
Well, because of my career, because I am in radio, I know about sound, and I know about the qualities of sound. And this was something that was large enough to create what I would call a full-bodied sound. It had depth, it had timbre, it had reverberation. So it wasn't a small being, whatever it was. It was large, and I would say at least the size of a bear or larger. And bears can range in Oregon from, 200 pounds to a couple of thousand pounds, but it was a large being, whatever it was.
As this creature's exerting this noise, how loud was it? Could you feel it?
Well, I couldn't really feel anything. It was almost like a communication, not just like sending out a noise. Between I'm going to say the first and the second one, since it appeared to be 2 different things making noise, but it seemed as though it was a communication between the 2 rather than just an animal out there howling at the moon. And it was very odd, very strange, very interesting, actually.
As this creature was making the sound, did it start at a certain tone, or was it a solid tone all the way through, or did it build up in volume or frequency that you could tell as you were listening?
Starts out kind of as a low, almost a moan, and then it goes slowly but exponentially to a high-pitched, ends at a very high pitch. It was like that. It started out just kind of low and slow, and then as the pitch increased, so did the speed at which it went up.
And how long did these calls last? Were all of them about the same amount of length of time?
The actual calls themselves would probably last about 5 seconds, and but it happened many times throughout that night. And that's the only time we ever heard it out there. For some reason, that particular night, they were close enough or brazen enough or what, but they were making the calls right there, right near us. And we could tell it was very near.
Did you ever share this? Hey, Mark, did you ever share this encounter with anybody else in the area, and did they have any comments or did they share any other stories with you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, our nearest neighbor, the next day I talked to, and I said, did you hear anything last night outside? And, trying not to prejudice their answer, and they said that, why, did you hear something screeching? And I said, well, how did you know that? And they said, oh, we've heard it before. They didn't hear anything that night, but they said they'd heard it before. They'd lived there for like 20 years, so, they've been listening to the woods for a long time. And I actually started researching Bigfoot after that, and within a couple of days I found some previous sightings in the area. And apparently in 1962 there was a father and son that were driving to the beach, and what they call the Bigfoot crossed their path, crossed the highway right in front of them, and it was at night. And as it turns out, that sighting was between a quarter and a half a mile from my house. So maybe it lends some credence to what I heard.
Going back to your encounter, what was your wife's reaction when this noise was happening?
Well, as I am a non-panicky person, she is quite the opposite. Her mind is very ingenuitive. She immediately thought it was Bigfoot, and she was scared. She thought it was going to come and start banging on the window, the sliding door, and she wanted to pack up and leave the house that night, but I was able to get her calmed back down, but she was terrified. She was wanting out of there. She acted like she was a caged animal. She wanted out of that house. And I told her, I said, if you want to go somewhere and get a hotel room for the night, go ahead. I said, I'm going to stay because I'm interested. If something like that does happen, I want to be the one to be here.
Did you guys pick up any smells when you went out on your porch, like at night? Was there any odor?
No, there weren't any smells that we were aware of. It was just the sounds, but it did have kind of an eerie calm about it. I'm not a panicky person. I generally maintain, even though something around me might be going amiss. But this kind of got to me. This kind of got under my skin a little bit, and it wasn't long after the calls stopped that we went back in and locked the doors, as if that would have made any difference, if that's what it really was.
After everything calmed down, did you go out the next day and look for prints or anything?
That weekend after, I went out hiking in the woods trying to see if I could find any clues, and I didn't find anything that would indicate what the noise was coming from. But, even just walking out there after that, maybe it was psychosomatic, but you just had this feeling that something was watching you.
So, Mark, as this creature made these utterances, did your wife experience any physical abnormalities or any sensations that were just not normal?
Well, the only thing that she mentioned was that she said it kind of made her sick to her stomach. And I don't know if that was, adrenaline or emotions or what, but she was visibly ill after she started hearing the noise. But then after it calmed down, that seemed to go away. So I assume it was probably just nerves, but I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder if she got hit with a dose of infrasound.
What did you call that?
Infrasound. By the way, there's a section on our website. If you go out to SasquatchSyndicate.com under topics and go to audio evidence, you'll find a section on infrasound. But infrasound, it's a theory that Sasquatch, because it has a very high lung capacity and because it can use volume similar to other animals, it can use infrasound. So infrasound is a sound below 20 hertz, so it's lower than we can perceive, but just because we don't consciously hear it, that doesn't mean we don't respond to it. So being hit by infrasound, similar, elephants use it to communicate. They can communicate over 10 miles with it. We never hear it, but that's what they do. Tigers use it to stun their prey. So there's a lot of data on infrasound. In certain individuals, low frequency sound can induce feelings of fear or dread or even depression. But, there's a lot of things that cause infrasound: earthquakes, meteors, ocean waves, vibrating pipes in your attic. I mean, it's a very deep topic. So, check out the website. You can catch up a little bit more about infrasound. But, in humans, infrasound can cause a number of really strange kind of inexplicable effects, things like headaches, nausea, night terrors, sleep disorders.
Wow.
Bagpipes produce infrasound, so that was kind of a psychological warfare tool that was used in the past, because you can hear it from miles away, that droning.
Is it that low guttural sound?
Real low guttural. And actually, infrasound, it's not even audible to us. We feel it like...
It's a low frequency, though, right?
Super low frequency, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. There was a guy that was looking through his rifle scope, and he was looking at a deer, and then all of a sudden he heard a scream like you heard, and the deer was kind of like lackadaisically moving around. As soon as he heard the scream, the deer froze, and he could watch this right through his scope. Out of the tree line, the deer was about 30 feet outside the tree line. This Bigfoot comes out of the tree line, walks over to the deer, grabs it with one hand by its snout, throws it over its shoulder. Deer offered no resistance, threw it over its shoulder, walked back in the woods. But they say that infrasound, I've listened to these others, these guys, this one guy was going down a trail, they were mountain bikers. And he said he was going down the trail, it was 40 degrees, it was rainy. He stopped his bike, and he said, when you're a mountain biker, you don't stop your bike. The whole purpose is to not touch the ground. You go on your deal, you don't ever want to stop. You just want to keep going. He stops, gets off his bike, starts taking his clothes off. Well, his buddies, he was always faster than everybody else, so he drove up front. His buddies come down, and as soon as he got there, he said, hey, what are you doing? And he said, that's when I just came out of it. But he said it was the weirdest thing. I was sweating, nauseated, totally confused. He said, all I could think about was just getting my clothes off. It was so hot. And it's really interesting because this one guy was in a deer stand, and he said this little deer just comes running right beneath his deer stand, which is typically not where they want to go, because there's a human there and they can sense it. But it must have been the lesser of the evils that were out there. This thing was just covered in sweat. And I've heard that animals, as soon as that infrasound goes on, it stresses their body out so bad they start sweating. I want to go back to, Mark, when you said your wife heard something that sounded like something chewing on bones.
Right.
Could a part of some of the Sasquatch calls that we're familiar with is something called teeth popping, where it sounds like as though something is taking two rocks and clacking them together in a quick fashion.
Right.
Is it something that sounded like that, or could you explain a little bit more what you meant by it sounded like it was chewing on bones?
Now that you mention it, it could have been something like that. She just described it as, she came in running in the house saying, something's out there eating something with bones. And I went right out, and I didn't hear it. But I asked her to describe it, and she just said that it was just something crunching on bones. So I never thought of it before, but that teeth clacking thing could very well be what she heard.
Thinking about this sound, had you ever heard anything like this before?
I had heard things in the woods, camping and stuff like that I couldn't explain. I mean, I know what a bear sounds like. I know what a cougar sounds like. I know what a coyote sounds like. I know what a wolf sounds like. So when you hear something that you don't recognize, it's kind of creepy. And even myself, after that time that I heard this, I wasn't really into gold mining yet. It was a couple of years after that I actually began to do gold mining.
Speaking of gold mining, Mark, could you explain a little bit about your gold mining business and what it was you used to do?
When I was in Southern Oregon, I started a business where I would take people out and teach them how to pan for gold. And it was a lot of fun because I was normally a prospector anyway, so when I wasn't doing that, I was out prospecting for myself. So I got paid to go out and play like I would normally do anyway. But I had international people. I had people from England, people from Canada. One couple from Scotland came, and whole families would come and book a trip. And every person who booked a trip went home with gold. So it was pretty fun. And it was nice to see all the happy, smiling faces when they all left.
So, Mark, I know you've been out in the wilderness and have some experience gold mining. Have you heard any other individuals that have been out gold mining with you share any stories like this with you?
Yeah, a couple of people, we've gotten to talk about this before, and a couple of people that I've met have said that they've heard stories, and actually some of them had their own personal experiences.
On these excursions or in your travels, did you ever have any other audio encounters? I know you lived in a couple different places.
I've moved to southern Oregon along, kind of near the Rogue River, near Medford, and I would hear what sounded like footsteps in the forest around me. And when I'm talking about gold prospecting, I'm talking about being 5 miles or more off the nearest roadway. Because when it comes to gold mining, you have to get where other people don't get to get your best chance. So we would hike in for miles. So there was no civilization anywhere around us, no people anywhere around us, but I would hear what sounded like footsteps crunching through the forest behind me. And there weren't any noises that went along with that, but it sounded like something was going through there. And it wasn't a quadruped because they make a certain type of sound. And I don't know of any bipedal predator animals out in the woods unless a bear's walking on his hind legs, but I think I would have known if it was that coming up on me.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Mark, thanks again for coming on the show.
Sure.
Again, have a great birthday. We're going to move on to our second guest. I know that Mark had other details to share. We're going to have Mark back on the show. Mark's got a lot of great gold mining stories as well, and so we'll get to hear from him again at a later time. Our next guest is Shirley. Shirley is from Iron Springs, Washington. That's a small town on the Olympic Peninsula. For those in the Midwest and on the East Coast that don't know Washington State very well, Washington State, if you think of it as kind of a metal can opener, so to speak, there's what we call the Olympic Peninsula, which is along the Pacific Ocean. A lot of people think that when they look at Seattle in movies or TV shows, that Seattle's sitting on the ocean. It's actually not. That's actually on the Puget Sound. But the Pacific Ocean runs from Long Beach, Washington, all the way up to Neah Bay. And then you kind of have the inlet all the way from Neah Bay into Sequim and into Seattle into the Puget Sound. So that's kind of our geography lesson for the day. But where this took place, for those that are Twilight fans, is kind of south of La Push. So for those that have seen Edward and Bella running through the forest in La Push, there's two towns in that show, La Push and Forks. This is about 30 to 40 miles south of there, south of the Quinault Indian Reservation, but in some of that same type of area that you've seen on TV and in the movies. So Shirley lives in a very Sasquatch-rich environment as they kind of transition down from the Olympic National Park onto the coast. So this is an exciting encounter for us to air. I know it took Shirley some courage to get on the program, but she's going to share with us her encounter that her and Ray had, like I said, back in 2014. So Shirley, welcome again to the show. And if you wouldn't mind just doing a brief introduction and maybe describe to the listeners kind of where you live.
Sure. My name is Shirley, and I live in the Iron Springs area. It's just east of Highway 109 and south of Boone Creek, about 2 miles.
So Shirley, did you grow up here in the Pacific Northwest?
We did. My husband and I grew up in the Renton-Tukwila area, just southeast of Seattle. But for the most part, we were always Seattleites. I mean, between our children's sports, friends, and local church, we didn't have a lot of time really to do anything else.
So prior to your encounter, what was your background on Sasquatch or Bigfoot? What was your knowledge on the subject?
Other than myth and legend TV shows, I really didn't have a view on the subject. Honestly, I was definitely one of those suckers born every day. Anytime I heard some person on TV rambling about a sighting, but it's everywhere up here. A lot of businesses use it as a brand. There's a Bigfoot this or a Bigfoot that.
So if you wouldn't mind, if you could just share with our listeners, how did you and your husband end up on the Olympic Peninsula?
Well, like I said, my husband Ray and I moved up to Iron Springs back in 2008. It wasn't exactly planned, but after my mother passed away, the economy was rough, and we had a tough time selling her place. She wasn't exactly what I would call a clean woman, meaning she had a lot of stuff. Not a hoarder, mind you, but it wasn't a project you could tackle on the weekend. Her and my dad lived in that house for about 30 years. We made many trips up to the house from Seattle, and if you know traffic, it's not always an easy trip to get up there for the weekend to clean things out and stage the place. So before long, we got the place looking pretty decent. But after a year and a half listing the home, we decided we would just retire and move up to the house. It obviously wasn't going to sell. The economy was pretty rough.
So, Shirley, can you describe the property and just where this home is located, if you don't mind?
It's a quaint little place, not too far from the main road, which is Highway 109, but far enough back that you don't hear the noise from the road. So once we got the inside of the place squared away, which seemingly took forever, we started working on the outside of the home. We started tackling that project in the spring of 2011 and did everything from paving the driveway to rebuilding the flower beds and all the outside painting and whatnot. One of our biggest challenges was that my mom loved bush and tree cover. But with the ocean weather being rainy and cold and it's overcast a lot, we wanted to clear a few trees out and open up the property to get more daylight. So all that began back in the spring of 2012, by the time we had rented a brush hog and had an arborist come out to remove a few trees. But eventually Ray got the property looking pretty good. We even built a brick fire pit in the center of the yard, and Ray put a brick flower bed on the north side of the property line.
Shirley, you shared with me a little bit about the flower bed, and I think it's important for our listeners to understand what that bed looked like. Could you give us a description on maybe the height and length and what that flower bed was built from?
The flower bed itself, and this is important, it was raised brick. It was about 4 feet high, and then we put another 6-foot fence on top of it to keep the deer out, because they were constantly in there nibbling just about off everything we could plant. When the planter was finished, you could see the front of the flower bed, but not the back of it. It had about a 3-foot clearing behind it that Ray really created just to make it. But it backed up to the brush and wildberry bushes and vines. So it's pretty dense in behind the flower beds.
So in terms of the outside renovations, could you describe, or how long was it before your encounter? Obviously, you were doing a lot of construction to the property. How long was it in between kind of the construction and the renovation till the point where life around there actually settled down?
The property really started taking shape around 2013. We kind of got into our normal routine again after settling down with the move and getting the house how we wanted it. Life wasn't all that complicated. We took a walk every day up a trail towards Boone Creek, watched our favorite sitcoms, and really got to know each other again, which somehow you lose when you have kids. But that's another talk show. Anyway, other than the occasional weekend visit from the kids, it was a pretty normal life. And, of course, that is until I had my encounter.
Shirley, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just take the listeners into the encounter, maybe describe the setting and just kind of walk us in what actually happened.
Moving up to the coast, the local things to do include razor clamming, beach combing, kite flying, and fishing. And we started to get into clam digging as we had very close access. Back in May of 2014, we started clam digging with some friends close by. They had all the gear, and eventually Ray did get her own, but we borrowed theirs on many occasions. When we got home, everything was a sandy mess. The beach sand is really fine. It gets in everywhere. And so I didn't let Ray bring it anywhere close to the house. Since we didn't have a garage, a lot of times we just laid the clam guns up alongside the flower bed. They're basically just made out of PVC pipe with a handle and a hole. And when Ray wanted to clean them, he just hosed them off before we turned them to our neighbors the next time we saw them.
So for the folks that aren't in the Pacific Northwest, clam digs, maybe Shirley, you could describe a little bit about the clam dig itself and exactly how those get scheduled.
Clam digs happen when the authority tells you what time is available and what time is low tide to dig. So we let the gear sit outside and had it ready to go. The neighbors, they didn't clam as much as we did, probably. We were kind of new of it, so we were pretty excited. So we didn't return the clam guns all that often.
So as clam digs run all season long, as schedules are set, when did this encounter actually occur?
This happened in about October 10th, 2014. We were preparing everything for what's called a lantern dig. Ray and I got into an argument, which is what you do when you're retired, about really where we were going to go. The reason I remember this is the clam dig was open October 11th at Copalis Beach, and it was open 11th through 13th at Mocrox. I remember this pretty vividly because I had a function that weekend at the Copalis Community Church on the 12th, and so I told Ray it'd be easier to go clam digging on Sunday while we already were in Copalis. But he reminded me the 11th was the only day Copalis was open, and that was on Saturday. So we got to arguing about what day it is, as old people do, and eventually I admitted he was right, and we agreed we would go on Saturday night to dig. So after checking the schedule, we found out it was a night dig, and it didn't start until 9:30. I love a lantern dig, but I told him he and the neighbor were going to have to go because I had to get up for church, and I wanted to skip the dig. Ray headed off around 8:30 to pick up Joe, and I started to get ready for bed. I was reading a pretty good book. It was called Gone Girl, and wanted to finish that, and figured I'd have a nice relaxing night, so began to doze off. And this is when it happened. Around 11:30, I hear this commotion out near the flower bed. And I figured Ray was home putting away the clam guns, as he always does. But what seemed odd is I didn't hear his truck pull in. So I got up and peered out the window. And as I turned my head from left to right looking for his truck, I noticed a set of eyes on the other side of the flower bed.
Now, when you first saw these eyes, what did you think it was?
At first, I thought it was a deer or a raccoon on top of the bed, but as my eyes began to focus, I noticed this thing was hunched over the flower bed and looked like it was eating a piece of a carcass.
When you saw that, what was your first reaction?
I nearly fainted. It took about 20 seconds just to get my eyes on what I was looking at. I started to think we had a bear up here, but I'd never seen one around the property. So I decided to hit the floodlight, and this creature stands up and trips over the corner of the flower bed, knocking the corner of the bricks off. I mean, I nearly fainted. I swore I was seeing things, but I'd never seen one around our property.
I can imagine that was quite frightening. As it turns and it falls to the ground, what did it do next?
It picks itself back up off the ground almost immediately and darts through that blackberry vine. And if you know what that's like, that's not an easy thing to do. Never in my life had I seen something that tall. It had to be at least as tall as the fence above the flower bed. So my guess is it was almost 10 feet tall. So I'm calling Ray in a panic, and of course he didn't answer as he was clamming without a cell phone. So I ran and got the gun we keep in the kitchen drawer. I locked the house, and I sat inside until Ray got home around 1 a.m. So I told him my story, and he and Joe went out with flashlights to see what happened.
Were they able to see any footprints, or did they go out and look at the flower bed afterwards? Also, if you wouldn't mind just sharing, what was their reaction about your story?
Sure enough, the creature knocked off about 6 to 10 of the bricks from the corner of the flower bed. And Ray said what he found he was chewing on was a deer leg of some sort.
Looking back, do you think that the creature was more startled from the floodlight and that's why it fell? Or do you think it was just more startled that someone was actually home even though the car wasn't at the property? Do you think it was used to your environment?
Honestly, it happened so fast it's hard to say, but the creature was at least 10 feet tall.
You mentioned the height of the creature a few times. I know that in listening to a lot of witnesses, you only really have time to look at 1 or 2, maybe 3 features about the creature, but was there anything else in that moment in time you were able to observe?
His hair was a dark brown to gray color, and at that time of night, I would say it was more gray with a brown skin, or brown with a gray skin. It was really hard because I was so stoned.
Shirley, were you able to get a good look at the face? I know that your mind just has a really difficult time comprehending kind of what you're seeing, and, you know, seeing something stand up that's 10 foot tall, that's something that'll just kind of, you know, put your mind in a complete standstill. But did you get a chance to look at the face?
I did get a good look at him when he stood back up, but he had big sunken eyes, and I just remember the face was human. Not like us, but it was human.
Thinking about the face, what were some of the features that really stood out to you? I know you've had a lot of time to probably think about it, to dream about it, to have nightmares about it. What really stands out to you?
It definitely had a tougher skin. And I'd just say a Neanderthal-type ridge of a brow.
For our listeners, out on SasquatchSyndicate.com under topics, if you go down to photographic evidence, we have kind of a lineup, so to speak, of Sasquatch face photos. Shirley shared with me it was a cross between image 3, image 9, and image 17. So for those that have internet, if you want to go out there and look at kind of what she was seeing in the face, that'll kind of give you a good idea. Shirley, since your encounter, have you or Ray had any other experiences on your property?
No, we've never seen anything. And I guess I should say no, thank God, as what I saw was a monster, and they're not supposed to exist.
Shirley, since this encounter, how has your life changed? Are you back to your normal schedule? Are you still thinking about it? What's changed about your life since this experience?
Since then, I haven't been able to leave the house alone at night. Ray and I do everything together, but I think about it every night. It's just given me nightmares for almost 2 years.
I can imagine that's going to be something you think about for a long time, anytime you're out there at night. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners about this encounter?
I just want to say that they're out there, and I used to laugh or make fun of people that said they seen it. But once you do, it ruins everything you know about everything. And I guess as a result, my faith is much stronger.
I'm sure our listeners can understand that this has to have a profound impact on your faith and even your belief system. We've talked to other eyewitnesses that have kind of had that same type of experience. Could you just share what you meant by that on how your faith has changed?
Well, I definitely pray more for protection.
Shirley, thanks again so much for building up the courage to come on the show. I'm sure that there's other listeners that have had these same types of experiences, and so it's great for you to step forward and really share that experience with our listeners. So thanks again for coming on Sasquatch Syndicate, that encounter.
Oh, geez, Chuck, thanks for having me. It's good to be able to talk about these things and just get them off my chest. I think this will be with me for a long time.
Well, we have no doubt of that. You know, Shirley, hopefully at some point you'll be able to find an inner peace, and I know our listeners are wishing you well. You know, as you think about this experience, hopefully at some point you'll be able to embrace it and to accept it and maybe even find a little bit of joy in the fact that you were selected to have this experience. I know a lot of our listeners, a lot of our eyewitness encounters of folks that have moved out to these rural areas, had these experiences, and ultimately ended up leaving. Have you and Ray considered moving?
No, we're going to stay here. You know, this feels like home to me, but I got to tell you, it's when the night comes, it's really difficult for me.
Well, hang in there, Shirley, and thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and I know our listeners do as well.
Okay, well, thank you for having me.
This concludes our May 2016 podcast. Sasquatch Syndicate will return on Wednesday, June 1st. Thanks to our listeners and those that have been out to our website and those following us on social media. Sasquatch is a controversial subject, so for all the believers and disbelievers and those that will tell you they have all the answers, just remember, we're flying through space at 700 miles per hour. Buckle up.